Hey everyone, Tactics here with another plus 20 walkthrough and advanced dungeon guide for Dragonflight Season 1, this time going through the revamped Mists of Pandaria dungeon, Temple of the Jade Serpent. In this video, I'll walk you through how we handled each pull and boss, especially the troublesome packs that people have been struggling with just before the last boss. Things like lust timing, things like small route variations that may be useful, and other tips and tricks that will hopefully help you get this key timed. I have videos just like this one for several of the other Season 1 dungeons already out on my channel, which I'll link in the description as well, and the rest are going to be on the way shortly. So if you're interested in those, be sure to subscribe to the channel and click on that notification bell. Otherwise, let's get into the dungeon, and right off the bat here, you do have a bit of a decision on whether you're going right initially or left, and that's kind of where the one route variation is for this dungeon, right? For the most part, you do have to kind of W key and kill basically every single trash mob in the dungeon, but there is a choice here, and that's the twin fire torch ads that are initially on the right side, the first kind of mobs you face on this right side, those guys that put that random magic dot, and those guys can get pretty nasty unfortified. So you do have the option, especially if you have access to a rogue, to shroud past them, and instead you can do a little bit more trash before the third boss, which I can point out to you later on when we get to it as well. So in this, we're actually going to pull those mobs, and to do that, we're actually going to go right first and commit our bloodlust. From there, we're going to backtrack afterwards, just so we actually have lust, because we do want lust when we're fighting the stone step, the boss in this area as well. So we end up going back towards Wise Mari and doing that boss before actually coming back here and lusting on this boss. And again, that is strictly for lust timing. If we're killing this pack, we want to commit bloodlust to it. We know we want to bloodlust this boss, and so that kind of decides how we're pathing a little bit. One thing to note, that these trash packs are very, very scary. You're going to see something here. We miss a stop right as we're getting into this pull, and I will just instantly fall over and die. That is the Haunting Gaze from those Haunting Shaws. That ability previously was not stoppable. It now is. So that is a very, very high priority stop here, and that's exactly why I die on pull. We just missed the stop on that. Luckily, we are able to recover from this. AoE taunt's pretty good, but you basically want, as I can see, a stop there on both Shaws and a kick on both Shaws as well. And if you're not able to get a stop out, making sure you have some sort of major defensive running or anything you don't have covered is very, very important. But as you can see, even with that scuff, this pack kind of went relatively well because we lusted. We had so much damage, we were able to nuke it down ASAP. So that's very, very good. But yeah, Haunting Shaw, probably one of the more dangerous mobs in the entire dungeon. Obviously, that fear kick, if you miss it, it's a wipe, and your tank can just get absolutely nuked if you miss that very quick stoppable cast there. So try your best to stop those. Now, like I mentioned, we've moved back into the left side of the area because we've used our Bloodlust, which you want to use on that Strife and Peril boss. So instead, we're coming back to Wise Mari, who is quite straightforward, quite easy, definitely the easiest boss in this entire dungeon, letting our bloodlust kind of regen in the process. These pulls are a lot more scarier than a lot of people expected on Fortified, particularly those splash mobs. You can see here, these corrupt droplets, they just kind of spam splash, and it's a not insignificant amount of damage, especially with the number that you end up pulling. And so be careful with this. I'll show you after this how we handle that. But initially here, we just group everything up on this corner, and that lets you LOS the additional damage coming out of this corrupt water here. As you can see, ranged around the corner. Easy LOS. Melee will start doing it soon as well. But there's just a lot of damage in these packs, because this pack in particular has the most droplets, which is why you sometimes see people coming left first and bloodlusting this pack as well. Totally fine, by the way. That's also a perfectly fine strategy. And honestly, if you're able to skip past the twins that I just showed you pulling beforehand, that's probably the better strategy. If you lust this pull instead and then skip the twins, very, very good. But just note, you may have some issues running back if you ever wipe if you do that strategy. So just be careful with that. Otherwise, the big thing about this pull is just making sure that you're kicking the water speaker, getting rid of that extra damage. Anyone who can easily LOS that water dot here, see everyone but the tank basically, and making sure Tidal Burst gets stopped or kicked. Preference personally is to stop Tidal Burst and invest all of your kicks in the random target beam, just because it makes more sense. You can kick literally every beam and have no extra damage from those mobs if you do that. So that's what I would recommend in these packs. Pick the beam, stop the burst. Here's a little trick we do here. We just initially just pull the droplets with the remainder of that big guy here. And then when the big guy dies, we pull in this guy. We kill these droplets. And once these droplets are dead is when we add the rest of the pack. This is nice because you don't really lose cleave. What you do is a lot of this extra damage from this pull is gone because you've killed 3 droplets. And this guy just has so much extra health than the rest of the pack anyways. You get some extra cleave on him and he still dies around the same time. So that's a neat little trick you can do here. Pull these droplets initially when you just have the previous living water. When that living water dies, add in this guy. As me failing the LOS multiple times. And then once those droplets die, that's when we add this guy in here. So I'll kick him first, and then we have a range kick to get it second, just to make sure it's in. And then we can use this wall here for everyone to LOS. And of course, we do have that priest here as well for that magic dispel, mass dispel. So it's not too big a deal if some people get hit. And as you can see here, the health is like relatively close in terms of the actual pack dying at the same time. That one dies a little bit quicker, but it's really not a big deal. And of course, the kiting with Sanguine, always fun. And then similarly, we're going to pull this pack all the way back as well. And like I mentioned, we have kicks assigned to the actual bolts, and then stops assigned to the actual bursts here. And no, I did put a marker down there. There are 2 spots you can actually do this pack. You can actually pull this pack right to this pillar, and you can LOS around that pillar right there. Or you can do what we're doing here, and you can pull the pack all the way back to this area. You know, that burst won't do any damage to us because it's LOS. That damage is from the actual corrupt living water. And then you can use this area to LOS. I don't actually recommend pulling the pack where we're LOSing because the stairs can do weird things for like your healer and stuff like that. But so that's why we pull it around the corner fully, and then we can LOS on the stairs. It makes things a lot less weird and awkward for the LOS there. So that's why we're doing this. And again, like I mentioned, just getting as many Hydra Lance kicks as possible. And we're getting stops onto those tidal bursts just so that we maintain kicks and we're able to actually stop as much random damage as possible. I moved all the way back here because of that Sanguine puddle. Obviously, we still want to have the ability to LOS if we want to. And leaving that guy in a Sanguine puddle, not the best idea for timing this key. So that's why the movement there was across. And then we come to the first boss here, Wise Mari. Not very difficult boss here. No, I believe it's like a 3-kick rotation. We'll get all the kicks here. Warriors can spell reflect it if it's on them, so don't kick it if it's ever on a prot warrior or DPS warrior. You get a little bit of extra damage that way. Corrupted vortexes, you know, the usual. Get them out. There's really, I don't think there's too much to talk about this boss, so I'm going to skip him. Let's move forward. Oh, too far. Here we are waiting. And notice like Bloodlust is still on CD, right? So this is actually pretty good timing. We're gonna get Bloodlust around this boss here, which is exactly what we want. And there are 2 ways to handle the boss as well, but I'll talk about that when we actually get to the boss. Meanwhile, these packs, these Lesser Shaw, obviously be careful. They deal a decent chunk of damage when they die, and they tend to die at a similar time because they have way less HP than everything else. So be mindful of that. Particularly was nasty during that raging Fort week, but that was kind of double dipping because they were raging with that explosion. So be aware of that. But for us here, we wait until some of the kicks are dead, and particularly those Lesser Shaws are dead, and then we chain into this bird. And this bird is very nasty. The bleed is pretty insane on the tank, and so for safety here, we tend to just try and pull this guy alone and not move into the next tank pack, or pack rather, because that pack is also potentially scary for your tank, but this is a very good way to handle it. Also, of course, that bleed stacks up, right? I'm at 4 stacks of the bleed. Not ideal. Very good if you have like a dwarf in this dungeon, or you have an evoker that can do a bleed cleanse on you. But this is a lot of pain, which is why we're focusing this guy down. Again, making sure out of the territorial display. And I probably should have backed up here to reset. Yeah, instead I choose to die. So I probably should have backed up, but it's okay. The Songbird died there. And then this, we're getting into the pretty scary pack, especially if people don't know the prio target. So in this pack, you want to single target stun to stop the cast and absolutely nuke down the Golden Beetle. And the reason for this is twofold. One, it also has a stacking tank buster in staggering blow that reduces their max health. And 2, and probably more importantly, honestly, because, you know, tanks, is their shield that they put on themselves deals a ton of damage when it explodes. So, and you can't avoid that, right? Even if you purge the shield off, it still deals that damage. And so, well, you can't really stop it because it'll just keep casting a spell every time it gets unstunned. You can just chain CC it into oblivion. So as you see in this pack, we're going to start up with a big full kidney as soon as it starts casting. So there's the first cast, big kidney on it. And we're going to chain that into a Stormbolt to stop that. And we're going to chain that again, I believe, into just regular stun, gouge, whatever, and it's dead. We did not take a single cast. This pack looks like a complete joke because we did that. If you ignore that, or even if you don't fully focus or whatever, and that shield starts going out, you start getting deaths very, very quickly. You really, really want to make sure that that ad gets blown up, and in particular, a shield cast doesn't go off. If you let a staggering blow cast go off, you can actually strategically do that, by the way, because the tank will be fine with 1, even 2 stacks of that debuff. It's the shields you really want to prioritize not letting go through, because it is a ton of party damage. In the meantime, this guy, of course, just kick the Enrage. I believe he needs 2 kicks, and the Tiger that jumps out to the furthest player needs 1 kick on the Catnap. Really, the important part is making sure you nuke down that Beetle and chain stun it if you have that available to you. And this pack looks very, very clean because of that. You can also, like, once that guy dies, jump down early here and start killing the book to trigger the RP. We waited a bit here, but definitely probably a good idea. You'd save like 10-20 seconds by doing this a little bit earlier. So keep that in mind. And that brings us to the boss, where there are 2 kind of distinct ways to do it. One, which is higher damage uptime, and one which is much less healing intensive. And I believe we kind of show off both here by accident. But basically how it works is that once one of these guys goes to the immune state, they kind of stop dealing damage to anyone, so it becomes much easier to heal. So you can bounce back and forth, pushing one to immunity, then the next to immunity, then the other to immunity. It results in less DPS uptime, obviously, because you're not able to cleave them both at the same time. You sometimes have to sit there and wait for a few seconds if they're both immune, that kind of thing. But like I mentioned, way easier to heal, way less tank damage, way less party damage. And so because the timer is kind of free in this dungeon, if you don't wipe, obviously, sometimes, especially on higher keys, it's likely that you're going to do something like that just for pure safety reasons. So starting off though with the DPS uptime thing. So pretty much we lost on pull here. We just start on 1. We always start on strife. Doesn't really matter which one you pick. Now obviously we're DPSing. Once we get up to 7 stacks here, we're going to swap. And notice that we can still be cleaving, right? I still have bleeds on this guy. This guy's still taking damage. So those dots and stuff aren't ticking him up. And so that's kind of like the uptime and the extra damage I'm talking about. It's like you are still able to cleave onto that ad a bit while you're DPSing this ad. So you do kill this boss significantly faster if you don't push them into their immunity. But you will see later on here that it is way, way, way less damage. Like, look at the damage we're taking right now once this guy starts ramping up. Particularly when we get over to Strife, right? The damage is going to start ramping up. This guy goes immune. You can see we're starting to get low, but now literally everyone's kind of chilling. It's just this guy dealing a bit of damage. We're going to push this guy to immunity because this guy is still immune. And obviously, like I mentioned, we're losing damage here, but like no one's health bar is moving because we're dancing between immunity. So trade-off, bit of a damage loss, but way safer, like actually like 10 times safer to do this. So really depends on your group. And as we start bouncing back and forth again, because it's not really a big deal, bosses are almost dead, but you can see immediately how much extra damage we're taking by doing this strat, just for a little bit of extra damage uptime. So it really, really depends here how you want to handle that. Both are viable. One of them is obviously faster, but one of them is way, way safer as well. And then we're moving through here. And so this is where you would kind of get to the trash that you would pull if you had skipped the twins, the Fire Torch guys. So if you had skipped the 2 Fire Torch guys and the 1 ad before them, you would obviously be pulling this stuff. But there's this exact same setup, this 1 Shambling Infestor. Oh, me running back to Desperately Clear Thundering, ignore that. But there's this 1 Shambling Infestor and the patrol of the 2 guys down here, the Mistweaver and the Guardian. That same 3 packs or 3 mobs rather, exist on the opposite side right after Wise Mari. There's a door that opens up there, and it's the exact same 3 mobs, and those are the guys that you would have to go through and grab if you wanted to skip the twins. So that's the extra pack you would pull if you skip the twins, which is way safer, straight up. So again, that's why I am telling you I'm leaning towards that twin skip route, though it does, of course, involve either invis potting or using a rogue to shroud past them, and also quite punishing if you ever wipe, because they are going to block your path, of course. So moving on, this guy, not too much to talk about here. Something to note though, the Mistweavers, very important you have a curse to spell in this dungeon. That Touch of Karma, of course, instant cast on a random player, and it hurts. It really does hurt. Having a curse to spell, very important for that. Otherwise, your group is definitely going to be in a little bit of pain for sure here. So just be aware of that. See, our mage is the decurse here, so he's getting that ASAP. But other than that, not too much to talk about. But then we do start getting into the kind of spooky mobs in this next area. As you can see, there's a Touch of Karma going off, one shot there. We get into some of the spooky mobs here that a lot of people I've heard coming into my chat, coming to the YouTube comments, have been struggling with, and particularly the Shaws, of course, or Minions of Doubt, rather, and their Dark Claw ability. This is another ability here. This is a terrible angle, so I'm going to skip this. Actually, no, I should show you how we pull this. So basically, we do pull this first one back with a range kick, and that's just to avoid the patrol here. The camera angle sucks. I won't lie to you. It does kind of suck, but it is much safer. You get to avoid the pull. And the key here is pull small. Don't over pull. The timer in this dungeon is pretty free at a lot of key levels. So you don't need to over pull here. Like, we missed that pat. It would have been nice to pull that pat in before, or with this mob. We missed it. Oh well. Not the end of the world. Don't over pull here. I think what we're going to do now is we're going to hit this guy. We're going to wait for that patrol to leave. Then we're going to pull this pack in the corner here just to get some more cleave onto this boss. We're moving in. Again, big thing. Haunting Shaw. You either need to be fully prepared for that guy to blast you for a ton of shadow damage with a defensive, or make sure that there is a stomp on it. Minion of Doubt, the Dark Claw, is a little bit easier because it is backsteppable. If you remember my video from Hall's Valor, there were a ton of abilities in that dungeon that you can backstep. The Haunting Shaws is not one of them. You cannot backstep that ability. It is a ranged attack, so it just kind of blasts you no matter where you are unless you stop it. The Dark Claw is backsteppable. I'm also a prot warrior here, so I do save Spell Reflect specifically for Dark Claw whenever I can. But on top of being backsteppable, it's also just in general now stoppable as well. So I backstep that one there. As you see, I took literally no damage from it. So it is stoppable as well now, similar to the Haunting Shaw ability that didn't used to be stoppable. It now is. So that's actually been a change to a lot of abilities. This dungeon, I think, covered some of it in Halls. A lot of no-cood as well, which I'll cover in that video later on in the next week or two when I put that one out. Lots and lots of abilities were stealth changed to be stoppable that previously in the first week or two were not. So keep that in mind. Both of these tank busters in this dungeon, the two very scary ones, have both changed to be stoppable. And ensuring you stop them will be very important to your survivability. That is for sure. So here we're finishing off this pack here in either backstepping, stopping, or see, that's what happens when you miss it there. It was the Shaw back to back with the minion. We missed both. I didn't backstep the Doubt because I was just moving back into the corner for the Sanguine, and that involved me almost dying because of it. So very important to be coordinated if you're doing pulls like this, because now I'm going to go right into this pull right here because it's padding into us, and this is kind of the problem, right? What we should have done is tagged this pack in the corner and pulled it back to the entrance that we did with the previous pull, just so that this wouldn't happen. So now it gets a little bit spooky. We have to pull this pack together here, but we're able to get through it. Not the end of the world. But again, the big emphasis there, Minions of Doubt, Haunting Shaw, not just the kicks, but these abilities as well. There's a double stop there. Very good. Definitely would have saved my life because I probably would have died if we didn't double stop that. And then we're finishing off the rest. The rest of the trash here is relatively easy. It's really getting through these like 3 or 4 packs right at the beginning without getting absolutely demolished. So let's skip to the boss here, because this is definitely a spicy boss for sure. Also had a lot of people asking about this boss. So there is a neat little stair tech that you can use. I've seen people misusing it as well in pug groups, not really understanding what, like, I've seen people use it and then dodge towards the center of the room, for example. The way this stair tech works is basically abusing the z-axis on the waves, where they will just go underneath the stairs. And so what you can do is you pull the boss to the foot of the stairs, and the wave targeting this area will always just go under the stairs. So everyone, melee, tanks, can just dodge up the stairs without thinking every time the circle comes out. And ranged can just AFK at the top of the stairs and never need to dodge. That's how this works. So how you do it is pretty simple. Literally just take the boss over, and you want her at the foot of the bottom stairs here. You don't want her up here. You want her at the foot of the bottom stairs here. As you can see, no, there's just like the wave over there, but like there's actually just no potential hitbox because it's in the stairs. So you're using the z-axis to your advantage here. Now, besides this neat little tech to make like your ranged, make everyone's life easier, honestly, let's talk about this second phase. Because as you can see, my health is getting chunked, and it is very, very, very spooky. So the key to this phase as a tank, surviving that Jade dot and healing absorb that is really, really nasty, is twofold. One, you need to be on the same page as your healer. They need to know, hey, when this dot is on you, I am literally spamming you and you alone. And 2, you need to make sure that your cooldowns are planned out and staggered, and you don't panic stack them. Because if you panic stack on like one, like right here, if I'm like, oh shoot, I'm gonna die, and I start popping like another shield wall or something like that, all of a sudden now I'm like, okay, I get to the next one. Well, what do I have left? Well, I panic popped everything on the last one, so nothing. And so planning out your cooldowns here is exceptionally important, and then just having faith in both your own ability to self-heal and the ability of your healer to keep you up, very, very important. Rotating in externals, very important. So I don't think we did it on this pull, but darkness is a good rotate in. It can stop a bunch of the ticks from the dot. In this specific one, we just GS'd me. And you notice I don't overlap it with other cooldowns. We go back in. The next one is probably, is it a demo shout and a shield wall? What is it? Let's see. Let's see what it is. This one comes out. It's demo shout, self-heal, and a bunch of ignore pain, while also being spammed, which probably means the next one is going to be a shield wall. And that's the thing. I have these cooldowns. The key is not to stack them. So now I still have last stand. I will have my heal up again for the next one, and I'll be able to get a little bit of ignore pain out as well coming out. And this is probably going to be the scariest one, but it's just, yeah, there we go. The heal out, the last stand, and that's basically it. So I staggered out my cooldowns. The very first one was Spell Reflect and Guardian Spirit. The second one there, as we saw, was Demo Shout, Impending Victory, and a full Ignore Pain. The third one was Shield Wall, and the fourth one was also Impending Victory and Last Stand. So not stacking those abilities, spreading them out, being smart with how you're using your defensives is the key to this boss. And then, of course, being able to just not think about how you're dodging the waves at all and always just dodge in the same direction up the stairs helps take a lot of that other brain power out of the fight so you can focus solely on surviving. Also note, I was in defensive stance this entire boss as well, not in battle stance. So another note, at least as a prot warrior there, in terms of how to manage your cooldowns for this boss. Notice also we don't have Bloodlust up yet, so 45 seconds on that timer. We end up using this on the last boss, I think. But now let's get to that trash that everyone is very worried about. So this first pack, this was always here. There's not so much to talk about. This is like an easy one. The first 2 packs are quite easy, but I'm going to specifically talk about the third and the fourth pack. So same rule applies here. Relax, take a breath, pull slowly. Very, very dangerous pulls. In particular, if you chain this one with the left one, you probably can pull this with the right pull here, because there's only one extra kick in that right pull. The problem will become Curse to spells. You won't want to do that if you don't have access to Curse to spells, which we don't, obviously. Otherwise, this is just a Mistweaver and 2 Guardians. focus them down. Not too much to talk about here. Very simple. It's the next two. Let's fast forward a little bit here. Okay, so scary pack number 1. This one is scary because it will kill everyone but. And why I say that is because the water speakers both require 2 melee kicks and a stop in order to keep them kicked fully. And then of course the Mistweaver will also require either a kick or a stop of some kind to keep them from channeling people. And of course that channel does nuke very, very hard. So it is pretty scary and very, very high priority. The water speakers, you're trying to stop the random target damage and the bursts from going off. So basically this pack has 3 mobs, but like 50 million kicks. And that's really the difficulty in this pack here. So we're going to just go, we have marks, just confirming our kicks here for a second, chilling out, not a big deal. And then we're going in, pulling this pack. Double Spell Reflect there lines up very nicely, so keep that in mind. If the Prot Warrior goes in first, they can get a Double Spell Reflect. Ideally, using AoE stops there on the Tidal Burst, very, very nice. And then otherwise, using other kicks or stops, particularly on the Mistweaver, because that is a channeled spell, so it is possible to stop the Mistweaver, which gives you more kicks on this other mobs here. Another AoE stop there, and that's basically how you would handle this pack. Lots of kicks, lots of stops. Fortunately, get stuck in some Sanguine there, but that's how we deal with this pack. Now, let's talk about the pack after this, which is very, very scary for your tank. Like I mentioned earlier, Minions of Doubt, Haunting Shaw, by far the 2 most dangerous mobs in this dungeon for your tank. They each have tank busters, the 3 Dark Claws in this pack, plus the Haunting Shaw's Glare. There's a lot of shadow damage. Similarly with the Spell Reflect, if you're able to sync them up, that's nice. So what I would recommend, if you have a monk in your party, you can sweep them early on, like 2 or 3 seconds into the pull, and that'll sync up their Dark Claws if you want to do something like that. But otherwise, there's kind of another situation where AoE stops and backstepping are very, very important because, as I mentioned, first week, these weren't stoppable, it didn't appear to be, but now they are. So they've been fixed to be stoppable abilities, and it's really, really high priority that you stop because you have 4 of them in this pull. Now, something you can do is you can actually take this very slowly. You can CC this Minion of Doubt, you can CC this Minion of Doubt, and you can pull only these 3 mobs in the middle back. Nuke the Haunting Shaw because, like I mentioned, that's definitely the scariest one because you can't backstep it. It has that group wipe fear, and just in general is kind of annoying, so you can nuke that mob down, and then as you're able to kind of defeat the Minions of Doubt, you can add another one in. So you can take this pull really, really slowly if you want. We're not going to do that though. We're just going to pull it all. And so basically what ends up happening here is we're going to group them up. We're going to try and sync up the Dark Claws and fail, I believe. Yeah, because immediately right off the bat, the Dark Claws are desynced. And so we're just focused then on stopping the Haunting Shaw, and I'm focused on mitigating and backstepping the Dark Claws instead. Also is spell blockable, which is why you see my spell block here. Very, very good spell block dungeon if you're a Prot Warrior. So I commit that before needing to actually kite things. And of course, spell reflecting whenever possible on CD. Not able to actually sync them up to get the double spell reflect, but still able to just kind of generally kite this pack in a circle, have good uptime for the melee, keep it out of the Sanguine, and not die in the process. And otherwise, you know, it's really just the stops and making sure that they're either not able to Dark Claw you because of those stops, or because they're not in range of you. And that's the big thing there, is using range to your advantage, but not going crazy with your kiting, right? You want the pack to still be grouped. You want melee not to have to run across this entire room here and still have uptime, but you also don't want to die, right? So it is a fine line between staying in when you have the mitigation available to you, using your stops when you're doing so, or kiting and backstepping that Dark Claw to prevent it from even hitting you in the first place. Then we go straight into the boss here. There's plenty of ways to kind of handle this. One very, very important thing, particularly for higher tyrannical keys, is having access to either a Master Spell or an Impetus Spell from a Warlock. Are either of these mandatory? No. You'll see keys timed up to 20, 21, 22, probably more without either of those things. Does it require way more work on both your healer and defensive cooldown planning? 100%. So having one of those, and this is definitely probably going to be like a Warlock meta key for pushing high keys because strictly of this last boss and the Impetus Spell value, but it's certainly possible without it. Now, how we handle this boss initially, we just list on pull and we start blasting. This will last us through the first ad phase as well. And in terms of how we do the ad phase here, I think we don't fully do it initially on the first one, but really as long as your group is stacked and facing the same direction or generally stacked, then you will get ads stacked up. So right now just one person is out slightly and it was a little too slow, but you can see everyone that was on top of each other, these ads literally went right on top of each other just behind us. Like, it doesn't matter where in the room you do this, as long as you are somewhere stacked facing the same direction when that cast goes out, all your ads will spawn on top of each other. Very easy to AoE CC them, slow them, nuke them down very quickly. So keep that in mind. Doesn't matter where you are, just stack, face the same direction. That's the important thing. Then we come into Touch of Nothingness management. Very, very similar to the Necromancer boss in Theater of Pain. Lesser degree, the Menagerie boss in Streets. It's basically just 2 magic debuffs you need to manage that kind of pump the people they're on. Also, because it splashes to nearby players, we do have this kind of loose spread here, but notice we're not too spread because we do want to be able to fit in that mass dispel that just went off here. So we want to be spread so we're not cleaving each other, but close enough that we fit inside a mass dispel. Now, mass dispel only does cover every other Touch of Nothingness. So what we have to do here is instant dispel one person and then have another person commit a defensive there. So you see mage popping theirs there. We also have the rogue available to cloak later on, ice block later on, all those kinds of things as well. But we're able to get rid of every other one very, very quickly because of that mass dispel. If you had a warlock here, you'd be able to get everyone. The warlock would dispel one person with their imp, the healer would dispel the other with their healing dispel, and this would essentially be a non-mechanic every single time. So quite strong there. And the real scary part of this fight comes particularly if you only have one magic dispel. The person with the dot is kind of always in danger from taking a tick from the random target hit the Shaw does, and so that's really what you're worried about. Those are the players that are in danger. So if you don't have access to these dispels, you really want to make sure that you're rotating through defensives if you're the person that still has that debuff on them. And as the healer as well, you want to try and make sure that, hey, the mage used their defensive last time I left it up on them. It picked the mage again along with someone else. That other person hasn't gotten in a while. They have defensive up, dispel the mage so that other person can commit defense, right? So there's a lot of communication on this fight. It becomes a lot more difficult if you don't have access to that double dispel or that mass dispel. So that's why it's definitely recommended, particularly for higher and higher and higher keys. But like I mentioned, you can totally do it without that stuff. It just is a bit more work for you. Otherwise, this fight does just kind of rinse and repeat here. See, fully stacked, there it is, 5 ads right on top of each other, right behind us. You don't have to move anywhere. Do that anywhere in the room. Doesn't matter where you do it. But there it is, guys. That is this walkthrough. As always, if you enjoyed it, if you learned something, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. I really do appreciate the support. I've got plenty of videos just like this one on the way for Mythic Plus, and I also have some Mythic Raid boss guides coming as well, so be on the lookout for those. If you have any questions about tanking, about this dungeon, please do leave those down in the comments below. You can always also stop by my Twitch channel at Tactics and ask me there as well. Otherwise, thanks everyone so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.